Good morning. Take two. Okay. Welcome to the Home and Community-Based Care Department's fall meeting. We've had a few technical difficulties going to get this started, but I believe we can get this show on the road. The original reason why we were doing this in the boardroom, and I was going to show you this presentation, is because Commissioner Utterman is supposed to join us this morning. However, he's running late, and in the interest of time, we're going to follow through. Because the important thing is he wanted an audio recording of this. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a couple little things. I'm going to give you a brief introduction of why we're doing this presentation. And then I'm going to give you this presentation that I delivered to the county board on August 24th. It kind of talks about who we are as a department and what we do. And you got to think about this for a while because it was very important to get our elected officials to understand what we do in a 20-minute period that will stick with them. After that, Commissioner Utterman is here. I wanted to invite him up because we've had a wonderful opportunity to get to know him over the course of the year. And he is the first politician that has ever shown an interest in, let alone HCBC, but really what Health and Human Services does. And so he's been very actively engaged, and I wanted to give him an opportunity to kind of reflect back on what he's learned and what we do in our role. Finally, then we'll just take a brief break, and then I'm going to cover a couple issues, including recording of adult protection data, the future of the pandemic here and what it means for us in the workforce, and then I'm going to close on the holiday get-together party, whatever we're going to do in place. So, without further delay, I'm going to start the presentation. As I said, Commissioner Matt Utterman, who represents part of Chaska and Victoria, was elected and came new to Carver County. And in January, we had an initial meeting where we were, it was kind of like a new commissioner orientation. And at that point, he was very interested in what we do. And one of the things that came up a lot was min choices. And he wanted to have a meeting with us. And I said, absolutely, we'll follow up. But then I went home and I was thinking that night, how am I going to get him to understand the complexity of what we do? It takes years to get this in. And what I quickly realized is I needed an analogy that could be used to show the complexity of something, to pull it down to a small micro level and pull it out to a large macro level, because there's so many things that influence what we do on those days. And one of the things that I came up with is I tried to use the analogy of a children's strategy card game, like Pokemon or those other types of things that have different zones, different character cards, different abilities, and they all play out in different situations. And I thought the key things that are going to remember is that if I could have something that I could put on a tabletop, that I could interact with him, that I could show, that it gets him engaged in asking questions. And so what I came up with was an area that we basically had 4 general zones. We would always have a scenario zone, which could include all kinds of things. It could include the laws, the rules, the terms and conditions that we have to play with, who the players are, what the terms or conditions are. And we also have a money zone. And unfortunately, money is what drives everything we do in Health and Human Services and the world. And if it's going to relate to a county commissioner or something like that, they're going to want to see what's that cost in the county and what's the value for our dollar. The other area is time. And time becomes also a very important area that we have to describe, because time is money. And with time is money, we can use that to kind of equate to the different areas and how we do things and when we plan strategies out. And finally, then there's what we call the management zone. And I call the management zone is because that's the scenario where we make everything happen and how we pull it together. So when I first met with the commissioner, I sat down and we actually created the little game. We had little playing cards and everything, and there are 3 collector's items out there, the home edition, that are limited. I own one, I created it. Heather's got one, and Commissioner Utterman. But it was left with him more to look at and to spark memory and curiosity when we looked about those things. So when we first met with him, we just laid something out and said, what if a person wanted a min choices assessment? Who's involved in the scenario? We might lay down a client card. There might be a caregiver. There might be a legal representative. There might be somebody from the school. It could be anything. And all of a sudden he started realizing that there were a lot of cards. Well, what do you want to do? Well, we want to get them on an assessment. Well, wait a minute. We've got to look at, do they need MA? We throw out other cards. Now we've got to go to a financial department. Oh, we got rules from Minnesota Department of Human Services, and we put all that stuff down. We had lines of communication. Instantly, he could see, oh, things grow, they expand. You have to do things in stages. You can't do this until you do that. And all I wanted to show was that it was complex. And it clicked, because all of a sudden, it's like, aha, I've created a language or a way to understand in a different way so that we can have that common language. I also had to realize I had very short attention span to deal with, because he's a very busy man and he's got a lot of different places to go, so it had to sink in. So then the big thing was that he was very impressed with it and wanted to share that with the county board, and so we knew that this would be a natural thing that we could bring in front of them. But I can't really set him down at a table and start doing all that kind of stuff, and I had to have a bigger thing. So I decided to put all this up. Now there are 4 panels here that I'm going to begin to talk about, but there is a 5th one that I talked about in reserve, and I called that the future. So I did get a little brief thing here that Kim said that she's able to share a video, and if you are, I'm going to let Kim push play, and the people that are at home can watch it. Let me know when you've got it. It worked. No, I don't believe that they can hear the audio. Okay, they can continue. Is that the first one, or is? Now switch to the second video now that that one's done, please. Now what you're going to see here is a video of a very unique train. It's the Milwaukee Road 261, and it actually came through Chaska the morning of October 3rd. And this is a very special engine that was built in 1944 and retired in 1956, and it takes a lot of people to bring this together, to restore it, to operate it. Its boilers, the tracks, all the coordination. And so what I like to do is, and I did include this in there, is that analogy of a train engine or something like that to keep going, because everything that we do is a massive system that takes a lot of people to coordinate and get from A to B. But once it starts, it's slow to move. It's slow to keep going. But once it gets chugging along, it's doing great. But then when you have adjustments, they take time to react. So we've got to take our patience with things and realize that time and planning to make all those things to occur, because remember, this is moving hundreds of tons, and it's all under the power of water and heat. Okay, so on with the presentation. Starting out, when I met with the county board, I had to talk about the scenario and even why we're even here. And everything starts with the state capitol. Everything that we do is because of laws and health and human services. When you look up here, this is something that connects with the younger generation. His name is Bill, and it's a cartoon that goes back to I'm only a Bill and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. But the fact is that everything, if you look at all the laws of health and human services, the Children's Mental Health Act, there's going to be a sub-thing that says the county board must. And it'll go through the duties of establishing what we're supposed to do. Essentially, at its core element, there are laws that provide services, whether it be public welfare and related, home and community-based care, Children's Mental Health Act, duties of the county board, Vulnerable Adults Act, administrative rules, programs for developmental disabilities, social services for adults, social services for children, the community-based services manual. There are more rules and regulations out there, but if you boil it all down, it's going to say there are levels that the county board is responsible for. That's where we come in. We meet the county board's mandated requirements to the services in our community. The other thing that we always have to consider is there's these scenario timelines that are driven by the Minnesota Department of Human Services, and we can think of any number of them. The one example I have up here is a thing called Waiver Reimagined, and I pulled this chart from way back in 2017 as they were progressing through. Timelines never really follow through, but there's still the same theme of what they're doing. And we always have major programs going through. It could be our Min Choices revision. When you stop and think of what we do, how we're doing it today is completely different than 3 to 5 years ago, and it's going to evolve 3 to 5 years in the future, and it's all going to be driven by the state legislature and the laws, and our responsibility to follow after that. Now, why is all this going? Why aren't we doing this with public and private entities, and why aren't they taking care of it? Because the one thing that we have to remember, and it's going to get to the money zone, is that we are a governmental entity, and what we are dealing with here is governmental funds, state and federal funding, okay? and only a governmental entity can determine the eligibility and authorize access to government-funded programs. It is the local government authority who is responsible for monitoring, ensuring services are provided, and clients' rights are protected. That is the simplest way that you can describe to the county board what we do and why we do it. And how we pull that off is the HCBC department. And we have a mission that's pretty straightforward. It's simply to enhance the lives of clients through services that are proactive, community-based, and consumer-driven. That's what we strive to do. But there's a lot. How much are we talking about? At every given time, we touch about 1,400 cases a year. At any given time, we probably have 1,150 to 1,200 open. We do that with a very large department that has grown exponentially over the years. And growth is okay, and don't fear it, because we're in a growing county. But when you look at our department, our org chart, we're really kind of broke down into 4 primary units that speak to all the clients that we serve. And the first primary unit would be over there on the left is our long-term care unit that works with a lot of our medical assistance waivers, which I'll get into a little bit later. It has 2 subgroups, but it's really our developmental disabilities and our CADDY group, but they're dealing with people that have long-term care needs and are on medical assistance programs that keep them in the community. Second group is the Min Choices Assessment group. And this group, in addition, is the one that determines who is eligible and which programs they are. And everybody that receives services has to pass through that gate in order to get linked to it. We have another unit that is kind of what I kind of call that mixture that's got all the strange stuff kind of fit together in our department, but it's a nice mix. It's got Encore, it's got our adult protection group, and it's got our autism spectrum disorders unit. Encore is our adult day program. We're the only county left in the state with one. It's a crown jewel for us. We're very proud of that program and what it represents and what we do for the members of our community. We have the adult protection group, and then we also have the autism spectrum disorder, which is also unique how Carver County chose to approach that, and that we were unique as being one of probably the first counties to actually have that group. And why it's different is because how we looked at it. We took the approach of a children's mental health with as far as frequency and intensity of meetings and what they need, and we combine that with the flexibility of the consumer-directed programs that we use a lot, and I'll get to that part later. And then finally, we have our senior service unit, and with that senior service unit is also an administrative unit that helps process everything that we do. And boy, when I get to that money and start talking about process and what we do, you're going to find hundreds of millions of dollars pour into our economy because of the home community-based care department and these laws. So this is our group, this is the scenario, this is what we do. Let's get over to the money, the aspect. One of the biggest things that we've got to consider is really what this means for our community in terms of money and aspects. And when I talked earlier, I talked about 2 medical assistance waiver programs. Everything the state and the federal government does passes through that medical assistance lens. How big is that? Well, this is a pretty large dollar amounts that we're dealing with here. So for instance, in the area of money alone, our CADDY program has an allowable budget of $29.6 million a year. Our DD has a 23.6. If we look at an estimated of our EW waiver at 10.9, CSG 1.6, PCA $2 million, just alone of what this department authorizes through MMIS service agreements comes close to $68 million a year. Now stop and think. That's only stuff that we're authorizing through those sources. There are other sources. People go to the pharmacy and get a prescription. They go down to their doctor with their medical assistants. They're in an assisted living facility. They're in a care facility. They're in a hospital. They're receiving other types of services that are coming through. It is quick and easy to see when you see the number of senior living centers being developed all over this county, when you see the hospitals growing and everything, that hundreds of millions of dollars are coming through. Now think about that. And also not only our department, but they have to pass through our financial assistance department. We have to get all of that stuff. And every single service is line item by line item entered. Tens of thousands of lines. We're a huge accounting department. And when you look at all that direct money and doctor's visits are paid out, this becomes a very important part of our community, let alone the consumer-directed options where a lot of families are using it to be the paid staffing, and allows them to do other things like not have to work that second job so they can provide that care for that loved one in their home, okay? The other thing is great, so the county isn't paying for those services, but what about all those people you've got? Well, the state also does recognize in the federal government that they are basically putting in mandates that we do not have a choice, and they try to offset that by providing us revenue for the staff and what they do. And that can come in at an hourly rate for our waiver clients, where our case managers basically bill medical assistants close to about $100 an hour. Per contact, per time period, we have targeted case management, other types of terms that you've heard of, but what you really need to remember is we see them once for one visit during a certain time period, we get a pile of, or a set of money. We also have other things that kind of are more difficult. They're time studies, they're random. They stop in the hallway and they ask a social worker, what were you doing at 1:15? And they put a little number or a chart down, and then it gets ground in, and then after a couple of months you get a check that says, well, here, based on your random moment. But it all feeds in. The interesting thing is our revenue totals for the county is $4.5 million annually, okay? And in 2014, that total was $1.4 million. So in 7 years, that's how much this department has started to pull back in just on the work that the workers do. That allowed us to grow in the number of staff from 32 to 51 now. But when you look at that through the different years, you'll also see, though, if we look at this chart later, is that some areas grow and some areas expand. The biggest growth can be attributed to this is min choices, obviously. But there have been significant increases in the waiver programs and what we've done for revenue that allows more and more to come in. Finally, one of the things that the board is always going to be most concerned about is what are you costing for the county tax levy? And yes, there are some things that we do that do have to have a cost. And those things are variable, but what we really have to remember is those are typically state cost shifts. Those are things that didn't exist in the county years ago, but the state passed laws and said, guess what? You get to share the cost or the burden or whatever they want to call it. Some of the examples are, we have to pay 10% of the total cost for ME adults under 65 that are in nursing facilities. So the state just goes through a track. They say, you spend $100,000 for all your under 65 people. Here's your $10,000 share. We don't have a choice. Same goes for people that are in intermediate care facilities, used to be called ICFMRs. Guardianship, every year, it's about $80,000, $90,000 that we have to spend towards basically guardianship that's the county contracts with Lutheran Social Services to pay. And then, unfortunately, sometimes child foster care situations. Those are the lion's share though when it comes in. But when you do look at it, they're relatively low amounts and they're just minor percentages compared to what's pulled in and done. But that's it necessary. Now I want to shift over to that other zone, because the time zone is really how we do what we do. And when you look at the time zone, there's a couple of things that we have to remember. Time is really case management. And case management is the interactions with these clients, helping them access what they need by meeting their health and safety needs. Now, from a management point of view, we got to pay the bills. And we come to the county board and we ask for social workers. We've got to make sure that we get the money out the door and do that. And it's pretty good. We have a system that we also then use that we can use to predict, because I'm going to come back into this county board meeting every once in a while and say, I need more staff, and here's why, and you need to know why. But one of the things that we do is we look at time. And no matter what I do with any social worker, there's a finite amount of time that we have with them, 2,080 hours a year. But you've got to start carving off some stuff. They get PTO, they get vacations, they get breaks, they go places. It's not always 100% of that time. The best that we can hope for is what we call is that client time wheel. That's 70%. They can't stand it when I say it, but I keep saying 70%, 70%. Don't care if it's necessarily revenue generating of that 70%. I want them to focus 70% of their time on client-related activities. If they do that, the money will follow. But what we also have to do is how much can one person do? Because there's only so much time in the day. There's only so many hours. After we reduce that 2,080 and we take out that 17% and get them to 1,456 hours a year of all the work I can get out of them, we want to maximize that. But you can also have different types of clients and how you make up a caseload, and that's one of the things that we also have to look at. I can look at anyone and I can say I can give you the wrong 10 clients and give you the right 100 clients, and you're going to be just as equally busy. So what we do is we try to plan out and look at that. One of the things we do is by looking at tiers and the number of the amount of time that are spent with clients. And so with us, we try to break clients down in the amount of time that we have to spend with them. And a very intensive client's probably going to be more than 50 hours a year. Where your average client, you're probably going to be able to meet their needs somewhere between a span of 15 and 25. But you also have other things, and that we can start calculating out. For instance, now we have 777 clients that are on the DD and CADI waivers. We have 1,200 assessments that we're doing annually. And we can multiply that out. If we know an assessment by average takes about 12.5 hours, we can multiply that out by 1,200. If we know that a case manager has X amount of cases that are over 50 hours a week, we have to balance that type stuff out. But we know where that's coming from. No matter what happens, time equals money. And what does the case manager do when they are doing all that stuff? Well, they have a number of set activities. Excuse me. I can't read down that far. The case management activities, and primarily what they do is they focus on coordinating services, developing support plans for people based upon their assessed needs and preferences, evaluating and monitoring services in the support plan, helping people access needed services, helping people identify service providers, and informing legal representatives of their service options. That's the small, short, quick idea of what they do. Believe me, it's a lot more complex than that. But when they do that, there's also different areas of types of case management they do that by. They could be doing it through care coordination, developmental disabilities, relocation service coordinations, targeted case management, waivers, alternative care. All of these programs have different rules, different expectations, different routes to get through. And you can quickly see it becomes very difficult. Now, for every client that we have what we call here this client's annual life cycle. And you've got to think through everything that the client goes through. They go through it year after year after year. And so with that, it starts out with the eligibility determination. And that's the initial thing. That's where it goes through our min choices assessors. That goes with their financial department. We determine to get that disability. We then have to go through that with the assessment process after they're on MA. We've got to use that min choices and figure out what they qualify for. You put them into case management. Once that's all done, you're linking them up with the services. That is an ongoing living thing that's always changing. We all change throughout our lives. Might not have major changes from year to year, but from decade to decade, we have to plan for that. After case management, but it's also in there, is what I just call monitor and program administration. Just because you get it set up, there's also just that bureaucracy that goes behind it. They're due for this in 6 months. They have to have this done. We have to follow up with this. We have to document that. All of that stuff keeps counting because it goes to the last one, which is quality assurance and documentation of reporting. And that is that's a big thing. That is a very big thing that has to happen because we are constantly answering to auditors and to people that we're spending a lot of money for. The government wants to know what we're doing with that. So, now that you know kind of how we did it, and you're also going to ask in here, I had to just throw this in for time, and this is the steeple of Guardian Angels Church. I just wanted to make sure that the county commissioners knew that Guardian Angels Church closed its doors officially, and I went there in the early 70s, so it's kind of sad. But I also wanted to give them a plug to say, hey, if you're looking for any land or space or rent, I'm sure Guardian Angels would like to talk to you. Now, I'm going to move over to finally is that management zone of what we're looking at here type thing. And so one of the things is growth, and this is what's going to be occurring in the county, like it or not. Client growth and program growth. Client growth is pretty easy to see, and we can track that every year. And going back here to 2014, we had 400 clients on the CADI and the DD waiver, and now we're up to 777 in a 5-year plan. We are basically increasing by 55 clients a year, and that means the total enrolled. We service more because they go on and off during the course. Boom, 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 boom. And you can look at the populations of the results. Carver County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state. Currently, we have over 800 homes in development being built up. You can drive through anywhere and it's like, my God, there was a 100-acre field here last time I drove by, and now they're expanding. So we know the growth is coming. We know the population percentages. 1,400 clients served by the HCBC department in 2020. That equals 1.3% of our total population. The population projections for 2030 is 135,000. Based upon 1.3% of the population, we should be serving another 355 clients. So, you know, you can just see and you can start predicting this thing. It's not scary. Down here is that picture, and I kind of talked, and you saw at the beginning, you saw that locomotive type things. That's a picture, and if you look at it closer, there's just dials and everything in there, the complexity, turn back the pressure, get up the steam, add more coal. Everything is constantly in flux, and it's been very difficult to pull off because we've been getting more and more changes. And the thing that we're worried about most is this balance between time and money and where the future is headed. And the biggest problems that we face is the web of communication and technology and what we do. The world has changed. The pandemic has definitely proven that. We know that as a workforce we need to get more remote. A lot of things are going to change, but in the long run that's not going to work the best for us because we're social workers and we deal with people and we need to meet them in where they're at in their homes. We've been able to make that go, but eventually there is going to be a shift. What we do know is that we're 100% reliant on technology, and when it doesn't work, we don't work. So we need to work very hard on getting reliable technology and building that in. As you can see those webs. When you look also, I want you to think about the web of communication about what we do. It just is never the home and community-based care department. We could not do this without the support of our financial assistance department. We rely frequently on First Street Center with mental health. We rely on the county attorney's office. We rely on the sheriff's department with our adult protection. We rely on everybody to make this happen. And it's pretty impressive because when you think about it, each worker behind them has the resources of an entire county. We just have the ability to access it, communicate, talk, and get that done. We had a great example yesterday afternoon of a meeting that involved meetings of representatives from all of those trying to solve what do we do for this poor individual in the community. Finally, it's just to remember with that technology. Now, I want to close by going into a fourth zone that I'm just going to simply call the future. And this is where we've got to reflect back on the department and what this means and where we're headed. So, remember, everything about this, we are here solely for the clients and the citizens that we serve, okay? And that's about 1,400 a year. The social workers are the face of Carver County as far as the client is considered. They are meeting the clients, they are helping them, assist them in the community. They develop the connections. Their success of the client becomes our achievements and successes. And we also have to remember that the majority of our clients that we work with are in their situations beyond their control, and that we are here to help them remain and stay in that community. The social work job that they do is not easy, okay? We work with clients, it gets very difficult. It gets wearing on a person. They take that home with them. We're always struggling and trying to find out how we can do it. But what you need to know at Carver County is I can safely, confidently say you have the best department in the state of Minnesota. And I say that because I've had over 27 years experience of working in this. I know a lot of other counties. Part of what makes Carver County so unique is we're just at that perfect size where we really have that control to do that. But even beyond that, it's the staff that make that happen. And so here are some of the examples that I look at when I say you've got the best. One, we've got great longevity. There's not the turnover that you see in a lot of other areas. Yes, we have staff that leave, but from time to time you look, we really have longevity. And that's important because with a social worker, just like almost a lot of other positions in our department, it takes about 3 years before they become fully confident in what they do. Why? It's too complex. It's a huge world. You've got to welcome them into it. They've got to work their way through it. But until they start running across all the different situations, all the different programs, all the different county, the case scenarios, they start building that more confidence. And so as they get more and more time, after about 3 years, they're really good. But it's important that you keep them in and help with them. You've got to think of the skills and detail knowledge that it takes to pull off everything in that wide variety. And we have got some great experts in our department, but no one could do it all. No one could understand all the intricacies of the frailty of aging versus developmental disabilities, or the intricacies of autism, or whatever it might be, or the Min Choices assessment. And so we've got great knowledge skill workers that hold on to those specific conditions. There's also their ability to work together and coordinate the efforts of clients. And time again, one of the things that I get most proud of is when I do interviews and I hear, why do you want to work for Carver County? And they will consistently say, we know about your reputation. We know you care about the clients. You know that you follow up. They don't get that from a lot of those other clients, or from those other counties. The other thing that I proudly will show up is our track record with audits. And this is one of the things that keeps going back that we have to answer with management. And for the first time, I had it. I was going to give it to Commissioner Utterman today. We got a get out of jail free card. So the Medica staff, which I believe is Christy and Melissa Dallo, got such a perfect thing that Medica said, next year you don't have to go through an audit, and we'll see you in 2 years. And so we get this all the time though, whether it be our Blue Cross Blue Shield, our annual waiver audits, we get phenomenal ratings on those. We do work hard for it, and the staff are very diligent in that. The other thing is the revenue that they bring in consistently, again and again. They do that. They do their job. And then I want to just touch base on the future, what it means for the supervisors. The supervisors have to prove themselves first as a worker, and then they've got to become a supervisor, and that's a real struggle too. It's also a 3-year cycle. It's learning a new thing. But the hard part for them is a lot of times they kind of do it alone. You've got to think of them as social workers for the social workers. And if a social worker's got a bunch of caseloads, they absorb those problems. And it's hard. Sometimes, a lot of times, it can be thankless, but they're dedicated. And I have got 4 incredible supervisors that I can say, without a doubt, know the details and knowledge of their areas very well. And then there's me, and my job is simply to manage and coordinate the chaos to keep things going on schedule and try to make that stuff going. The challenges moving forward, as I said earlier, our rules, our laws are changing. It's going to be completely different a couple years from now. It's always going to be an evolution. And we've got to contend with growth. And I don't want the county board to be afraid of growth. Don't fear it. Embrace it, plan for it, be mindful of it. In 2013, we had 33 staff. In 2021, we have 51. That averaged an increase of 2 staff a year. Don't worry about it. We're doing what we need to. Finally, the clients. That's what we're most worried about as this future goes forward. Number one, there's going to be a major provider shortage. We've already seen with Waiver Reimagines and other programs going on, they're shifting the whole general thought of what we're doing. It's going to be more consumer directed. We need to bring in providers to meet needs, and then we also needed to make it easier for our clients to access our services where technology comes in. If the pandemic has taught us anything, is we need to get a little bit more fluid in how clients can access our services, fill out forms of communication. Think about when you go to your doctor's office or school records or children, you can look online. We want to work towards that. In addition, we're going to have to return to face-to-face contact. We don't know exactly when. It's really dependent all on the federal emergency standards, but there is going to be a point naturally where we are going to have to. So that's that future that we have. I'd like to thank you very much for your time. And if that's it, you can put that part up.